TV Crazy Man here. In this video I've collected tons of fun facts, goofs, and fascinating special effects info from the 70s greatest superhero television programs. Remember your favorite shows and some you completely forgot about in this compilation of my past classic TV videos. Our first trip into memory lane on our 70s timeline is the $6 Million Man, whose first TV movie debuted in 1973. The regular series began in 1974 and ran into 1978 selling toys, and for those that grew up in the 70s, forever becoming one of our biggest memories of that time period. First up in this compilation is a video I did on the effects, goofs, and some fun facts about this iconic series. The $6 Million Man had many iconic aspects to it, the biggest one being the sound effects, which gradually evolved over time. At first, the Bionic sounds we think of when Steve Austin did many of his superpowered feats just did not exist. For example, in this second episode of Season 1, when Austin jumps down to Oscar Goldman, there isn't much sound at all. Unless you count the musical note, of course. It's clearly not as dramatic as it would later become. The first season did feature a cool sound effect for Austin's bionic eye, which was really just a sped up satellite sound that producer Harv Bennett picked out of a sound room. The Bionic Woman's ear sound effect was just a sped up submarine sonar. Season 1's episode Day of the Robot was the first to use the bionic strength sound, but it was only used for the robot's movements and not Steve Austin. The bionic sound would be heard again on Season 1's Dr. Wells is Missing. But why the sound came from this non-superpowered individual is beyond me. Now feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first time we actually hear the bionic sound come from Steve Austin is Season 1's episode The Coward. In one of my favorite episodes, The $7 Million Man, the bionic sound is heard here and there, but it's largely missing. It's really missed during the bionic arm wrestling match. Now in the third season, when Steve thinks back to the incidents of this episode, the bionic strength sound is added to the arm wrestling scene, and it's a vast improvement.
It's wild, Steve. It's wild.
Did you know the $7 Million Man's name, Barney Miller, was changed to Barney Hiller because of the Barney Miller TV series that was also on ABC? I would have kept it the same. It's not like there couldn't be two Barney Millers in the whole world. Say, is that an Emmy Award in Oscar's office? Through the magic of HD television screens, this gator now looks a little fake, but still more realistic than most modern CGI animals I've seen on television lately. Now when the Bionic Man sees the danger, he takes off running, but he's wearing different clothes as he's running. Now there's no way that muddy quicksand will ever come off of those pants. Well, you know, you can't be right about everything. I wonder if they found a washing machine with Tide in the jungle.
The dirt you see the most is the dirt Tide cleans the best.
Now this bionic leap is interesting. This is, from what I've seen, to be one of the few times they use wires with a jump. You can tell the way he takes off, it's a lot more like he's Superman flying than leaping. And then we get another shot, which may be Lee Majors jumping off of a ladder, possibly. You can't tell how high he's leaping because of the camera angle. Thanks to DVD commentary from writer Kenneth Johnson for the second season episode Bionic Woman Part 2, we know that ladders were used for bionic jumps, plus there's mention of it in the Bionic book Reconstructed. Also in the episode Operation Firefly, Steve puts his foot down to stop a runaway taxicab that looks like it was built in the 1950s. But when it takes off down a cliff, it suddenly becomes a 1970s model. And then it blows up for no apparent reason. Super confident their audience knows absolutely nothing about cars, apparently, they doubled down with a couple more shots of the late 60s, early 70s model car in flames. Believe it or not. In the episode Day of the Robot, The robot picks up the back of a car and moves it around. But from Steve's position at the front, he should be seeing the car move around as well, but the front isn't moving at all, and he doesn't even notice until he sees the robot with the whole car in his hands.
You recognize this man? You recognize this man?
Now I guess they hoped the TV screens were just too small to notice this one. It's almost a little strange they couldn't get their hands on the right picture.
Isn't anything ever easy?
On the episode, Dr. Wells is missing. Steve has to use his legs to turn over a bad guy's car due to an arm injury. Notice his legs are hitting above the back wheel. Also notice the side of the car is fine without any major dents. So where did that big dent in the door come from? And why do cars always have to explode every time they go off a cliff? You know, it wouldn't surprise me if that wasn't even the same car. You know, it's always fun to see when a stuntman takes over a shot, but it's even cooler when it looks like the stuntman is doing something that almost looks superhuman without any wires. I wish I could do that, but I'd probably just bust up my knee or something. I wonder how many hours these stuntmen train for this kind of thing. Of course, maybe it just looks a little harder to me because I'm starting to get old. You know, I'm actually a big Shatner fan. I love his work as Captain Kirk, of course, and T.J. Hooker. But this probably isn't one of my favorite Shatner appearances.
I'm burning bright now, Steve!
Well, okie dokie then.
Don't come any closer.
Yeah, I bet Lee Majors was thinking, definitely not a problem here.
I can't control it!
Come on, Lee, give the guy a break. His acting's not that bad on this particular episode. Well, you know, you'd think that if you teamed Shatner up with Lee Majors, the TV set would literally explode from the awesomeness of it. But I think it just exploded from the weirdness of the whole thing. Okay, I should mention in fairness that Shatner's character was suffering with loss of his sanity as he developed strange mental powers.
I feel like a walking computer.
It's wild, Steve. It's wild!
Here's a quick continuity error in the episode The Coward. These kind of errors happen a lot in older TV series because of the speed to which they had to produce programming. According to the Bionic book, they were only given 6 days to shoot an episode, so reshoots were kept to a minimum. Also, according to the book, there were some complaints when the Bionic Woman got 7 days instead of 6. In Season 2, on the episode Nuclear Alert, 2 bad guys are getting into a truck. Notice this guy is about to run around and supposedly get into the truck. And also keep your eye on the bottom of the truck. Yep, even though we see him in the truck later, he clearly kept on going. And there he is. In the episode, The Midas Touch, in between shots, the hubcap came back.
Give me that gun, Connors. What?
Did you ever wonder if breaking handcuffs like that hurt Steve's non-bionic arm? Oh look, that's Rick Hurst, who played Cletus on the Dukes of Hazzard. In the episode, Act of Piracy, Steve jumps into the water with green socks on that immediately turn into flippers, which then turn into bare feet when he gets out of the water. You know, I recently found this same anomaly on another TV series, Wonder Woman, on my last Goofs video. Here's another cool stuntman shot that is definitely easy to see that it isn't Lee Majors. Well, at least he had some grass to land on this time. On this particular Bionic Leap, they didn't cut off Lee Majors' jump fast enough. As you can see, he's coming back down way before he could get anywhere near the helicopter. Looks like they had a stuntman hanging on waiting to let go of the helicopter to make it look like Austin had jumped all the way up there. Here's another example of using wires for a jump, this time from the episode Lost Love. I always thought it was cool when I was a kid how the robots in this show would seem so lifelike and human until they were destroyed and then they instantly turn into mannequins. Plastic. But the funny thing in this episode is that when Oscar picks up his robot duplicate's head, it looks lifelike again. From this to this Believe it or not. In a tragic parachute scene from the Origin of the Bionic Woman episode, why does Jamie's parachute turn from yellow and blue to all white and then back again? I think most Bionic fans remember the end of the Bionic Woman Part 2 where Steve runs after Jamie, whose Bionics are failing, right in the middle of a huge storm. Well, the lightning strike used in this segment was also used on the pilot for the Incredible Hulk and in the weekly intro of the series. Kenneth Johnson, who wrote this episode, also used the premise of this scene for the ending of the Incredible Hulk episode Married. They really knew how to bring a tear to your eye back then.
I'll miss you, David.
Of course, Season 3 started off on a happier note, with the return of the Bionic Woman and the pillow fight. No stunt people were needed for this scene, but I do suspect the pillow was rigged, as Jamie's pillow is leaking feathers before the Bionic pillow fight even begins. Here's an interesting way to perform a Bionic event. On the episode The Song and Dance Spy, guest starring singer Sonny Bono. Sonny Bono, you know, he sang that song, I Got You Babe, well, anyway, would share. Here he's seen being grabbed and placed on crates with one Bionic arm. Or is he? In order to pull this off, it looks like Sonny simply jumped down pretending to be a karate expert, and they just ran the film backwards. Sonny's hair sort of gives it away. In the episode, one of our running backs is missing. They pulled off some bionic jumps with the help of a hidden trampoline, which worked amazingly well. Now, Lee Majors did a lot of his own stunts, including jumping off ladders and etc., to make it look like he was bionically jumping, as I believe he did here.
Now I keep in shape.
Now, in this fight scene with the $7 million man and Steve Austin, they kept jumping back and forth between Majors and the stuntman, which is apparent from the stuntman's hair color and cut. Now this next little stunt, I'm sure Lee was glad he didn't do himself, as the stuntman gets bopped in the face pretty daggum hard. And these days they probably would have used a couple of CGI cartoon guys to do this one. You know, someday I bet they replace football players with CGI characters or robots. There's a couple of things on the episode The Winning Smile. First one, I'm not sure what this is supposed to be, where it's a type of inner tube or wrapped up tires, but it breaks apart like some kind of cheap foam rubber. After that, Steve throws an oil drum that makes a huge mess, but it's completely cleaned up when Oscar runs in. I guess maybe they didn't want to take a chance on getting Oscar's suit dirty.
It's Bionic Bigfoot. Bionic Bigfoot, new from Kenner. $6 million man sold separately.
The introduction of Bigfoot to the $6 million man was a big success. Bigfoot was brought to life thanks to a decent costume and a very large Andre the Giant, and in the 4th season, Ted Cassidy, who also did the voice of the Hulk on the Bill Bixby-led series. This looks a lot like the stuntman that jumped out of the truck on the episode Stranger in Broken Fork. There he is again. You know, looking for stuntmen is almost like looking for sightings of Bigfoot. You know, they can't quite decide if they want Steve Austin's shirt on or off. I don't know, I guess they didn't think we would notice the shirt collar. Here's a neat trick they pulled on us on the episode Love Song for Tanya. A bad guy is shown getting orders from the boss while sitting in this fancy leather office chair. But somehow, much later, when he starts his car, if you look closely, you can see that he's still sitting in it. Once again, just for comparison, here he is sitting in the office, and here he is sitting in the car. In the episode Return of Bigfoot, Steve is knocked out while trying to stop Bigfoot. You know, I'm not sure, but I think Bigfoot was wearing boots. Must be disco boots, because even Bigfoot liked to get down in the 70s. The Bionic Boy episode got high ratings from what I read, but a planned spin-off never happened. In this scene, the Bionic Boy easily goes around Frank Gifford. We see Gifford sitting in the grass, and then suddenly, where did that cow come from? Must be a bionic cow to move that fast. Clearly there's no cow behind him, and then boom. I found another fast-moving cow once on a previous Andy Griffith Show Goofs video I did. I wonder if the cows are related. See the girl in the blue and white dress dancing with the Bionic boy? If I didn't know any better, I'd think she was watching herself dance. I guess it could be a twin, I suppose, or one of those Twilight Zone things.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you.
Another fun, possibly Twilight Zone-like moment happened when Steve Austin stood next to his own $6 Million Man action figure. In the episode Death Probe, it looks like the probe needs a helping hand. You know, it goes to show you how much you can do in the area of special effects with just the simplest of things, as long as it's out of the camera's range.
That's right.
Speaking of hands, Steve gets a hand as he's removing a drain pipe. You know, you see these mysterious hands on a lot of shows. Andy Griffith Show, Munsters, especially Knight Rider. Now the worst prop award goes to the episode Danny's Inferno with this very inaccurately small-sized dummy replica of a teenager Austin is carrying to safety. On the last Bigfoot episode, Steve Austin throws two bad guys up onto a tree limb. When the second one goes up, his buddy has turned into a dummy. Now more than likely, the stuntmen that were involved in this trick probably jumped off backwards, and then they just rewound the film to make it look like they were going up instead of down. I'm also guessing that they probably didn't want more than one stuntman up there at a time, thus the dummy mannequin. Now there is only one thing that bothers me about my assessment, and that's the dummy that would be the one on your left almost seems to be turning his head. It's weird, but he looks fake to me other than that. When the $6 Million Man and Bionic Bigfoot take a tumble downhill, it looks like Bigfoot's costume starts to come off around his ankles. On the episode, Target Steve Austin, the Bionic Man runs past the camera crew, who appear on screen for several seconds. Now check out this cool ghost car in the sky. It is kind of bizarre. Steve Austin is running through the woods when he appears to look up into the sky, and eventually there seems to be a car driving through the clouds, before the camera shot goes back to Austin again. You know, I do have to wonder how you can type at bionic speed with only one bionic arm. Seems like that would be awfully hard.
In the Great Hall of the Justice League.
And now a quick look back at the Super Friends, which debuted in 1973 and became a major part of our Saturday mornings back in the 70s and 80s. The first version of the Super Friends only produced new episodes the first season and was reran until 1977, when the Wonder Twins replaced Marvin, Wendy, and Wonder Dog on the all-new Super Friends Hour. That was followed by a Challenge of the Super Friends in 78, The World's Greatest Super Friends in 1979, and on it went until the very last version of the Super Friends, called the Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians in 1985. Even though the series had a lot of goofs that were pretty normal for Hanna-Barbera at the time, we still loved it. If you'd like to see a lot of crazy goofs from the Super Friends and more, check out my video on Hanna-Barbera Goofs. 1974 saw the debut of a couple of my favorite superhero TV shows, Shazam and Hong Kong Phooey. 3 if you count Happy Days with the Fonz, who seem to have superhuman abilities, without a need for a costume, unless you count the leather jacket. Who knows, maybe it was a magic jacket.
Cool it! Let's see Tarzan do that.
Back to Shazam, a hit on Saturday mornings that would introduce and combine with another very popular hero, Isis. And now, from one of my past videos, some goofs, fun facts, and a little history from both shows.
ISIS! Wow!
Oh, mighty Isis.
The 70s Saturday morning TV superhero Isis debuted in 1975 as part of the Shazam Isis Hour. The Saturday morning Shazam series on CBS had already premiered as a solo series the year before, starring Michael Gray, Les Tremayne, and Jackson Bostwick as Captain Marvel. The character first appeared in Whiz Comics #2 way back in 1940, Of course, most comic fans know that DC sued over Cap's similarities to Superman, and eventually DC would acquire the rights to the character.
I don't understand it.
Marvel Comics created their own Captain Marvel, so when the original Fawcett Comics Cap came back in the 70s, the hero kept his name, but his book was entitled Shazam to avoid any legal hassles. In the show, unlike the comics, Billy is always talking to these ancient heroes, known as the Elders on the series.
Appear before my seeking eyes.
You are obedient and respectful, Billy. However, you will meet someone unlike yourself.
Jackson Bostwick played Captain Marvel. That is, until he was fired after missing a day, after sustaining an injury that producers didn't believe. They thought he was just holding out for more money. After that, John Davey took over as Captain Marvel for 11 more episodes. Now, Michael Gray played Billy Batson. I was very surprised to see him do a cameo in the new Shazam movie sequel, wearing his classic TV Shazam shirt.
We'll return to Shazam.
They explained that the reason Billy and Mentor were traveling the country was that Billy Batson's radio show had sent him on a roving assignment to do stories about American youth with Mentor as an advisor. The character Isis was actually a creation of Filmation Studios and had not ever existed in comics before. She did get a short-lived comic book series based on the TV show. Isis came out about the same time as the introduction of the Bionic Woman on the $6 Million Man and the premiere of the Wonder Woman TV pilot starring Linda Carter. In 2 seasons, Isis had appeared with Captain Marvel 3 times on Shazam episodes, and Captain Marvel had teamed up with Isis 3 times on her episodes. Isis would then return to Saturday mornings in reruns, but without Shazam, and the show was then named The Secrets of Isis. Joanna Cameron played Isis, of course. She actually never appeared with the original Captain Marvel of the series, Jackson Bostwick, who was replaced by John Davey in Shazam's 2nd season.
You know, all this taught me a lesson.
Shazam and Isis both had moral segments at the end where the hero would talk about the lesson learned each episode.
Doing anything that you know is wrong is dumb. Well, we all know that 2 wrongs don't make a right.
If a person can't like you for what you are, then maybe they're not worth having as friends. Before we can like others, we must first like ourselves. Honesty is the best policy. May sound corny now, but it's really true.
To me, Isis is sort of a mix of Wonder Woman meets Samantha Stevens from Bewitched.
Oh, zephyr winds which blow on high, lift me now so I can fly.
All of her powers are basically what amounts to spells she casts through some sort of incantation or rhyme. Typical powers include flying, levitating, stopping time, super strength by removing the effects of gravity, and so forth.
Turn back to me.
From what I read from the book Super Chicks, Joanna Cameron did all her own stunts. The flying was done with wires and wind machines. I'm sure they must have also used some methods similar to what George Reeves had used in the 1950s, like projecting film of scenery behind her, and at times it looks like she was riding something as only a small portion of her body is visible as she zooms along. 2 episodes were shot per week in the summer beginning in July and August of 1975 for the first season. They used a 6-day shooting schedule, which was similar to the schedule used by the $6 Million Man for 1 full-hour episode. It has been said in comparison to prime-time shows of the time, the budget was extremely small, which meant they had to be pretty creative. Isis' secret identity was that of a schoolteacher named Andrea Thomas, who had a pet bird named Tut that she would send after Captain Marvel at least a few times on the series. Brian Cutler played her friend Rick Mason.
Whatever it is just as scared as we are.
I actually never realized until I was researching this video that he's the actor that played Brad, the guy in the Hulk episode Married, that puts the move on Banner's future wife and ends up getting beat up by the Hulk. Joanna Pang played Cindy Lee. I guess she was kind of like the female version of Jimmy Olsen. Did you know that the Bobby Brady actor Mike Lucan played on an episode of Isis And Michael Gray, who played Billy Batson on Shazam, was on an episode of The Brady Bunch. Joanna Cameron is also known for another superhero for her guest appearance on the 70s Spider-Man TV series, The Deadly Dust Parts 1 and 2, which was later turned into a movie released to foreign markets. She also appeared in a lot of commercials back in the day. According to Wikipedia, she has a spot on the Guinness Book of World Records for the most commercials done.
The Freedom Force. ISIS.
In 1978, ISIS was part of an animated superhero team known as the Freedom Force. Joanna Cameron did not do the voice work, though. There were only 5 episodes done. It was a segment of the Tarzan and the Super 7 series. And now let's look at some goofs and effects. As I said before, they were on a tight budget and a rigid schedule, so mistakes happened.
That was an excellent observation.
On the first episode, The Lights of Mystery Mountain, Cameron's boots are high-heeled, and when she takes off after the bad guy, her heels are suddenly flat. You know, they used to do the same trick on Wonder Woman a lot. I guess they wanted the heroine to stand tall, but not fall. In the episode, Spots of the Leopard, ISIS raises a light blue car in the air. Or is it red? No, it's blue. No, it must be red. Oh, I'm so confused. Also in this episode, this is Chuck, and this is how Chuck sounds.
Every company that's most likely to be burglarized.
Now listen to how Chuck sounds on the phone.
That's tomorrow. Sounds great.
Okay.
I don't think that's Chuck. On the episode, Rockhound's Roost, the bear looks very strange. Very strange. I guess they didn't have time to get a real bear like they did the year before on Shazam.
Thank goodness.
And you know, I think that bear was drunk. How dry I am. Speaking of fake animals, they did the old man in the ape suit for the episode The Show Off, which was probably better than the bear. About the same time, Wonder Woman had her own ape confrontation in the episode Wonder Woman vs. Gargantua. Which one do you think looked better? On the episode Scuba Duba, Andrea takes off her glasses, but they mixed in previous footage of a transformation scene where her glasses were on. On the ISIS Marvel team-up episode Funny Gal, Captain Marvel must pull a boat to safety, but he jumps into the water versus just flying off. Of course, maybe he just needed to cool off. In the episode Dreams of Flight, when Mike Dawson falls off a wooden bridge, you can see the safety rope that's attached to the stuntman. In the episode The Hitchhiker, a group of kids are heading towards certain doom. But really, I don't think the car appears to be moving at all. It's probably just sitting parked in a studio. Then when the car heads towards the cliff, it looks like all the passengers have disappeared. Then ISIS reverses time, and once the car's back on top, there's passengers again. Between 1975 and 76, we got 2 short-lived series about heroes that can go invisible. First The Invisible Man in 75 and Gemini Man in 76. In 1975, Linda Carter was introduced to us in the TV movie The New Original Wonder Woman. And then the regular series began in 1976 and ran until 1979. Next up is the last Wonder Woman video I did, which takes a look at Goofs, special effects, and some of the guest stars from the series. In the Wonder Woman pilot episode from 1975, Princess Diana finds Steve Trevor seriously wounded on the beach. So she picks him up and carries him like a rag doll. Literally. You can tell he's a dummy by the way his feet sort of dangle back and forth.
Oh, somebody's got to be kidding.
So you probably know what happens next. Amazons have a contest to see who will take Steve Trevor back to America and see about this World War II thing that's going on. Notice the device in the Amazon's hand. This device was used mostly by Linda Carter, of course, during the series to trigger small explosions on her bracelets to make it appear that bullets were bouncing off. Diana wins, of course, and rushes Steve to a hospital in America. Again, we see Linda Carter carrying the dummy version of Steve Trevor. Another trick they used was to put a table underneath a man to enable whoever Linda Carter was carrying to just sort of roll along with her. You can actually see part of the table in the second season episode, The Deadly Toys.
I don't need a gun to take you. I was Nuremberg judo champ.
Now, in all honesty, the big fight at the end of the pilot should have lasted about 2 seconds max. Now, this woman is able to kick, knock down, and overpower Wonder Woman, who can literally lift a car off the ground. Now, I do remember enjoying this episode as a kid, but I do think that bothered me just a little bit. When Wonder Woman enters a burning barn in the daytime, a minute later she drives a Jeep out, and it appears like it's nighttime. Also, there's a weird black bar blocking the view of Wonder Woman's face for some reason. I'm not sure if they put that up there to block the stunt person's face or what, or if that's just some kind of weird anomaly. If you know, well, let me know in the comments below. Before they settled on the bright light transformations, they used this slow, methodical turn for Diana changing to Wonder Woman. But it cost too much and it took too long to produce. Well, she got the belt, she got the tiara, oh, she forgot the bracelets. Now here's a look from the end of the first episode of Linda Carter with her bracelet bullets gadget in her hand. In the second episode, Wonder Woman is missing her bracelets again. I think they used the same transformation shot from the first episode, but from a different camera angle this time. In episode 4, Deborah Winger debuted as Wonder Girl. It's too bad she didn't stick around for the second season. Sometimes on Wonder Woman, and honestly this was something that happened on almost all older shows, 1 second you'd see Wonder Woman outside, then suddenly she pops into an inside studio shot with a blank wall behind her, usually the color of the sky. In this episode, Wonder Girl's competing against the other Amazons on Paradise Island in front of her mom, now played by Carolyn Jones from the Addams Family. Look to your left, there's a trailer on Paradise Island. Maybe the Amazons needed some place to change clothes. And I think there's a car back there. Interesting trivia note, in this episode, Wonder Girl and General Blankenship drive through the neighborhood of Bewitched and I Dream a Genie. On part 2, even though it's supposed to be 1942, you can see what looks like a 70s El Camino driving by in the background. If that's what it is, one of those these days would cost you somewhere between $18,000 to $30,000, even sometimes $40,000. You know, they really did a great job with the invisible plane on the pilot TV movie, but on this episode they went with a toy plane and Wonder Dolls for the effect. In the episode Wonder Woman vs. Gargantua, Linda Carter faces an angry ape in the days when you either used a real animal or a guy in a suit. 9 times out of 10, if a gorilla was involved, it was a guy in a suit, as in this episode, which can still be better than a computer-generated image in many ways.
That is supposed to impress me.
In this scene, Gargantua is in the process of kidnapping Higgins. I mean actor John Hillerman from Magnum P.I. Notice the red alarm on the wall that Higgins is trying to hit. When the second MP comes in, the alarm is missing. I guess it served its purpose and was no longer needed.
We are not amused.
Later, as Gargantua is carrying Higgins down the wall, we can see it's actually a dummy.
3 men go up the stairs around the back of the building.
In this scene, another 70s car zooms by in the background. In this scene, Diana turns into Wonder Woman, changing or moving several things in the room. Did you ever notice that Wonder Woman has the power to remove the heels on her boots instantly, depending on the need, you know, like climbing walls, for instance? On the episode, Judgment from Space, if you look close, you can tell this night scene isn't from the 40s, but more like the late 60s or early 70s. Next, we'll look at some goofs from the episode, The Bushwhackers. It guest starred the King of the Cowboys, Roy Rogers. There's a widespread rumor that Roy, possibly due to his Christian faith and very high moral standards, had something to do with Linda Carter not wearing her typical Wonder Woman costume. But she did wear it along with a special riding suit, just not as much as usual. Linda Carter, for her part, said that she never heard any complaints from Roy about her costume at this point. In fact, she said Roy was just happy to be in the episode, to promote adoption, as he himself had adopted several kids. Speaking of kids, why do all the kids in this episode have 1970s haircuts? I mean, at this point, we're still in the 1940s, or at least we're supposed to be.
Since when is Texas part of your territory?
Wonder why Roy didn't notice that the Texas flag was waving upside down. Whoops, it looks like a boom mic managed to get into the shot. Well, there's the invisible toy plane again with Wonder Doll. Steve goes behind a rock. Comes out another man, and he falls into a hole. Now take note of how far apart the bars are that Wonder Woman is bent. If I didn't know any better, I would think those bars were made out of something very flexible. That way they sort of unbent themselves back onto Wonder Woman. The last episode of the first season brings back Carolyn Jones and Deborah Winger as Wonder Girl, plus the guy from Airplane and the Starman TV series from the 80s, Robert Hayes, guest stars, and we get one last shot of the old toy invisible airplane and Wonder Doll. Here's a quick bit of trivia. While Wonder Woman was set during World War II on television, the comics copied the series and moved their setting to the 1940s. And when Wonder Woman moved back to the present, the comic followed right along as well. In the second season, Wonder Woman returns to America. This time it's the 1970s. A lot has changed. The invisible plane now looks more like a jet plane, and the action figures aboard, though, look more like toys. They did up the level of the stunts, I think, through the second and third seasons. There's some pretty awesome stuff here, but they really goofed up by limiting Lyle Wagner's involvement in the series. You see him less and less. All he seems to do for the most part is touch base with Diana on the phone. In the first episode of the second season, I noticed that they upgraded Wonder Woman's tiara to actually take the shape of a boomerang, which looks cool and makes sense. But later episodes it was back to sticking to the round shape that would have zero chance of working in the real world. In the second episode that season, with a title that I definitely can't pronounce, Diana is tied up in a cave with dynamite. Or is she? She looks free to me before she even turns into Wonder Woman. This scene was filmed at the Bronson Cave section of the Griffith Park, where they filmed the 66 Batman cave exit, and where they also did some shooting for the 1948 Superman serial with Kirk Allen. And I'm reasonably certain they filmed this scene from the 70s Legends of Superheroes TV special from the same area. I've done videos on all these, so check them out after you finish this one. This reminds me, actor Lyle Wagner tested for the 1966 Batman. Can you imagine what that might have looked like?
Holy caboose!
Right you are.
2 to 2. 2 to 2.
Right. It must be an address.
I get it. 222 Glover Avenue.
You've done it, chum.
On the episode, The Man Who Could Move the World. This man can move objects with his mind. Now back in the day, whenever people did Jedi tricks, there was always some strings attached somewhere. In this episode, we got another shot of the invisible jet with Wonder Doll action figure.
Hey, baby, you're good. You want a boogie?
In the episode Knockout, Diana escapes capture in a dress. Then she's suddenly in pants, right before she transforms into Wonder Woman. In the episode I Do, I Do, Wonder Woman saves an older lady from a horse gone wild. The weird thing is that she's riding on a trail with no buildings or fences around, and when the horse rears up, suddenly there's a fence, buildings, and a couple of other horses in the background for a second, and then they're gone. Remember the 70s were a time of high inflationary prices, and yet gas was only 70 cents a gallon for premium. In the episode The Man Who Made Volcanoes, Diana gets into a fight with another agent while her partner watches. There's not supposed to be anybody else around, so who's that watching? In the two-part episode Mind Stealers from Outer Space, aliens known as Skrill send a nice shiny red truck over a cliff that instantly becomes an old clunker as it goes over. The interesting thing is there's another red vehicle in the trees. Does something go wrong with the previous take possibly? And here's another thing, there's a cameraman trying to hide behind a tree getting a side shot. In part 2, Wonder Woman sends this Darth Vader mutant look-alike over a railing right into what is probably a stuntman's airbag. I guess even supervillains like to be safe, especially when up against Wonder Woman. So this goof, I'm pretty sure, was made to mess with our heads. Wonder Woman goes out on her balcony. She then leaps down from her window. In the episode, The Deadly Toys, Wonder Woman is attacked by a flying toy airplane on wires. We probably missed the wires on our smaller screens back then, but what puzzles me is who does that hand belong to that's apparently handing her the airplane in the middle of the air? I wonder if this is Thing from the Addams Family. In the episode, Light-Fingered Lady, I'm pretty sure we weren't supposed to see that guy. Looks like he's helping a stunt lady do her jump. Now you can see the board pop up as she goes into the air. You know, those stunt people were really amazing. I mean, they literally flew in the air without wires. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here in this one. Linda Carter is in a boat. She transforms into her regular suit, and for some reason she's totally somewhere else. And then she transforms the rest of the way into her diving suit, and she's back on the boat. Boy, this guy's in trouble. He's totally lost his parachute. I think Linda forgot that she wasn't wearing glasses in this shot. Lots more goofs to come, but please don't forget to comment and hit the like. And away we go. In the episode, Iraq is missing. Diana puts a seatbelt on Rover the robot, and the shot changes and it's instantly gone. And then it's on again later. Diana bends down to pick up a coffee cup from Rover, but whose arm is that actually picking up the cup? Because whoever it is isn't wearing the same color of clothing. Here's a magic trick from the episode Seance of Terror. See the older couple walking towards Diana? Now you don't. Poof, they're gone. Now I just had to mention this amazing moment in TV history. I mean, look, it's Tubbs from Miami Vice getting punched by Radar from MASH, and then Radar gets the girl. Now I only mention it because I'm also a big Miami Vice fan, and this is just too strange not to bring attention to. Wonder Woman helps a girl with amazing powers. In the big fight towards the end of this episode, Wonder Woman is trapped in a glass tube, but when she leaps out of it, it totally disappears. So the bad guy pulls a lever to drop a net onto the girl, but Wonder Woman signals to the girl to use her powers to stop the net in the middle of the air. But I just wondered, why did the girl just didn't, not run under the net in the first place? In the episode, The Murderous Missile, the wires holding it up were pretty easy to see, even in 1978. Now, I'm not sure about on a small cell phone, but I seem to recall my mom or dad pointing this out to me way back in the day. In the third season episode, My Teenage Idol is missing.
Break a leg, guys.
Two leaf carrots go directly on stage, one with a black shirt, one with a white, and then they both end up with white shirts. In the episode Hot Wheels, the driver of the truck tries to trick Wonder Woman by changing into a heavier stuntman with a wig, but she is not amused.
We are not amused.
In the episode Formisa, that word, Steve and Diana look at the photo of the woman who is known as that word, and later Diana encounters this woman wearing the exact same thing in the exact same pose as if this were actually the Twilight Zone.
A journey into a wondrous land of imagination.
I'm not sure they thought this one through. Oh look, it's the cast of Knots Landing on the episode Time Bomb. I always thought it was neat that these two who played husband and wife on Knots Landing were chasing each other first in Wonder Woman. Time Bomb starts in the year 2155, where the Knots Landing cast is from. Cassandra takes off into the past to get rich. Apparently in the future, they've gotten rid of capitalism.
It'll be fascinating to watch a capitalistic society at work.
So who's paying for all this equipment anyway? And then is this a big beach, or is there just no grass in the future? Anyway, she travels to 1978, which is cool, but for some reason she went one way and her cloak went another. I wonder what's wrong with these people. They act like they never saw a time traveler before. On the episode, Skateboard Whiz, Wonder Woman leaps into a burning building and the smoke is shown going backwards. This is because to make it appear that Wonder Woman is leaping up, they would have a stunt woman jump backwards, and then they just rewind the film. It works amazingly well, but there are a few signs that can pop up here and there that give it away in some shots. Only Wonder Woman could skate in heels like that. Hey, where'd her heels go? Oh well. Now the interesting thing about this clip is the shadow in the background that indicates the sun actually moved from the time Diana spins and the moment she's Wonder Woman, which makes you wonder how much time was there between these two shots. Not only does Wonder Woman have the power to remove heels by stepping onto a skateboard, she can also add fins as soon as she hits the water, apparently. In this episode, Diana gets rescued for a change. But when her rescuer comes into the building, the timer for the explosive device is at 56 seconds. But after he roams around for an entire minute, the timer only shows 6 seconds have passed. Well, you know how it is. They always save the day at the very last second. They never run out of time, no matter what. A van pulls out in front of Wonder Woman, and she's forced to jump over the van in a very cool action shot. But did you ever wonder how it seems like whenever a car or a motorcycle needs to jump over something, they just seem to do it, even without a ramp? Well, in the real world, there's always a ramp, but we just aren't supposed to see it. In the episode, the girl with a gift for disaster. This car is dented already, and it's about to get a lot more. But when it explodes, the dents are all gone. That's a pretty neat trick. Explosion that makes things better. Wonder Woman, from time to time, has made some objects disappear when she does her transformation, but this time she really outdoes herself when she makes a whole van disappear. Jamie Summers first appeared in a 1975 two-part $6 Million Man episode entitled The Bionic Woman. In that episode, Steve Austin reunites with his high school sweetheart, Jamie Summers, but tragedy strikes on a skydiving date when her parachute malfunctions on the way down. Steve has to make the case to Oscar for rebuilding her crushed bones with bionic limbs.
You're in love with her. What's that got to do with it? You'd sell your soul for her.
Jamie's right arm, both legs, and one of her ears were now bionic.
What about it? You're getting better.
How did that happen?
Shortly after Jamie gets better, Steve and Jamie get engaged to be married.
What kind of a life are we going to have with each other?
What kind of a life are we going to have without each other?
Things take a turn for the worse. Jamie starts to reject her bionics and supposedly dies. But the Bionic Woman was so popular that they had to find a way to bring her back. The creators of the $6 Million Man decided that Jamie hadn't died at all, but that her survival had been kept secret from Steve Austin. Unfortunately, Steve and Jamie's newly rekindled romance was tremendously halted, as Jamie was now suffering from a form of amnesia that prevented her from remembering her relationship to Steve Austin.
Haven't I seen you before?
The Bionic Woman would be launched into her own series in 1976 as a mid-season replacement. Some of the best episodes of the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man occurred when they teamed up for crossovers. But unfortunately that stopped when the Bionic Woman was canceled from ABC and moved to NBC for its last third season. But the characters Oscar and Rudy Wells still appeared on both shows and both networks. The third season brought forth the addition of the bionic dog named Max, which I happen to love as a kid. Both series, The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, ended the same year, but the bionic duo of Steve Austin and the Bionic Woman would return for 3 TV movies, and they would finally get married. You gotta love a happy ending. Jamie's abilities were limited. Once she jumped off a building that was just a little too tall trying to escape a fembot, and caused severe damage to her bionic legs. Did you know that Lindsay Wagner won an Emmy Award for her portrayal as the Bionic Woman? But even Lindsay Wagner, as good as an actress as she is, could still make some bloopers.
He does love you. No, he doesn't. He does. But, well, I'll be a cinema.
Get me the men's room.
It does. Oh, I do this every time. Does this look like a woman out of shape to you?
Put it down.
But you gotta give a better. I'm sorry you had to see this too. Yes, he does, Amanda. Oh. What happened?
We failed. The Moyer. She said shit.
Electro Woman and Dinah Girl. That show ran for 16 episodes in 1976 and is still well remembered. Perhaps I'll do a video just for them sometime in the future. Wonderbug ran between 1976 through 1978. It was a segment of the Croft Super Show. It also featured Electro Woman and Dinah Girl, Bigfoot and Wildboy, and Magic Mongo.
It's me, Captain Cool.
The series was featured in all 32 episodes of the Croft Super Show, but only 6 new episodes were produced for the second season. The show was obviously inspired by the TV animated series Speed Buggy that featured a talking car with the voice by cartoon legend Mel Blanc. The show had a lot in common with Scooby-Doo as well as Speed Buggy. They faced criminals who sometimes try to scare away somebody with Bigfoot hoaxes or phony ghost stories, and like Speed Buggy, they faced the occasional sci-fi evil like a mad scientist with a shrinking ray or an android. Like Scooby-Doo, the kids would often run in fear from the bad guys until they were able to capture the crooks with the aid of Wonderbug. Wonderbug had both a board game and a lunchbox that was sold in 1976. It was created by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, who also made Thundar the Barbarian. Wonderbug's secret identity is Schleppcar, who is actually falling apart.
You're right, Barry. Smugglers? Our exhaust pipe. And our tailpipes.
Thanks to a magic horn of unknown origins, the old car can turn into a super car. Wonderbug was self-aware and spoke in mumbled jargon that only Barry could understand.
What's Schleppcar saying, Barry? It's nothing.
The kids would often lose the horn, or it would be stolen from them, to which they would have to get it back so Wonderbug could save the day.
He just said that weird guy and his android stole his horn.
Stole his horn? And without that horn, he may never be able to become Wonderbug ever again.
Wonderbug's powers included flying,
Won't be long now.
bowling, shooting out water, soap, or other liquids, his antenna served as an arm to allow him to grab things. He could also even use his seatbelts to throw at crooks and capture them. He was also a master detective. Monster Squad aired Saturday mornings on NBC from September 11, 1976 to September 3rd, 1977. The Monster Squad featured a sort of comedic superhero team of monsters that do good deeds and fight bad guys in order to make up for the misdeeds of their past. The monster heroes included Dracula, Wolfman, and the Frankenstein's monster. According to the show, Walt, a criminology student who was also a night watchman at a wax museum, built a crime computer that somehow brought to life wax statues of the legendary monsters. In the show, the monsters all seem to have the memories of the real monsters, which leads you to believe that somehow they are the real deal that's been brought back to life. The group travels in a cool-looking monster van. Each monster had a utility belt, like the 60s Batman. Creator Stanley Ralph Ross was one of the main writers from the Adam West Batman TV series, so he brought a lot of that campy fun to the Monster Squad. Julie Newmar, aka the Catwoman, even guest starred as the Ultra Witch on one episode. Frankenstein actor Michael Lane even played on a couple of episodes of Batman as the character Daddy Longlegs in the episodes Caught in the Spider's Den and The Black Widow Strikes Again. Oh, and Ross was also the voice of Gorilla Grodd on The Challenge of the Super Friends.
You puny super friends are no match for us.
And worked to develop the Linda Carter Wonder Woman series of the 70s.
Welcoming you to the new adventures of Batman.
Batman was given a new cartoon series in 1977 on CBS, while he also appeared on the Super Friends on ABC. This series had the advantage of having the voices of Adam West and Burt Ward.
Legendary Bigfoot, who 8 years ago saved a young child lost in the vast wilderness and raised that child until he grew up to be Wildboy.
Bigfoot and Wildboy seemed to copy the $6 Million Man's Bionic Bigfoot with similar sound effects and running in slow motion. Now, there were no new episodes for Bigfoot and Wildboy in 1978, but in the summer of '79, Bigfoot and Wildboy got their own half-an-hour series without the Croft Super Show. Now, why it debuted in the summer is kind of weird. Now, I remember vaguely being very excited as a kid to get to see brand new episodes on Saturday morning. And in the summer, which was very unusual. He debuted in the series Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels in 1977. The Teen Angels were sort of a parody of Charlie's Angels. Captain Caveman's design was taken from the 1968 Wacky Racist series characters called the Slag Brothers. And they were basically cavemen that looked pretty much exactly like Captain Caveman, club and all. The story structure was basically like Scooby-Doo, where the Teen Angels would find clues that led to the capture of a bad guy at the end of the episode. And they would usually have to unmask the bad guy, just like on Scooby. The only difference was the bad guy wasn't usually dressed as a monster, at least not in every case. And just like the Scooby Gang, the Teen Angels had their own van, except Captain Caveman lived on top of the van in his cave. The open narrative explains to the viewer that Captain Caveman was set free by the Teen Angels from his frozen block of ice.
Now the constant companion to the Teen Angels, Brenda, Dee Dee, and Taffy.
Now if you notice right there in that narrative in the intro, they got Dee Dee and Brenda's names mixed up. Now Captain Caveman would often shout his name before taking off to catch a bad guy, kind of like a war cry.
Captain
But often his power would just give out.
Munga Munga, bad time for energy crisis. Munga, a bad time for power failure.
Now Captain Caveman could pull all kinds of prehistoric tools and creatures from his hair, which covered his entire body. His club helped him fly and contained tools that would pop out of the top. He also had super strength that, again, would sometimes fail him. The Robonic Stooges featured a superhero animated version of the Three Stooges.
How are we going to get that out?
Use your head, dummy.
Surprise! It's Curly!
Instead of the mummy, we got the dummy.
It was produced by Hanna-Barbera and ran originally from 1977 to 1978 and was a segment of another show called The Skatebirds. After The Skatebirds was canceled, the Robonic Stooges were given their own time slot.
And here come the Skatebirds. Knock Knock, Scooters, Sat, and Scat Cat. Then the Robonic Stooges.
Now if you watch the show, it seems like the Robonic Stooges are actually cyborgs, but the intro states that they are designed to be the world's most perfect electronic robots, which apparently did not work out that way, obviously. I mean the part about being perfect. The Stooges live in a junkyard, and each episode would get sent on a mission by their boss, Agent 000, which makes you think they have to be partly human, right? I mean, since they need jobs.
We're not ordinary people. We're morons.
We suspect the evil Jacques Yo-Yo.
Hey, don't worry, boss. We'll stamp him out like this.
The Stooges possessed the power to stretch their limbs and could pull out a different gizmo depending on the need at the time.
Activate Curly battering ram.
Yahoo! Ride him, Curly. It's Sabatucci, I tell you.
I'll Sabatucci you.
The Stooges faced off against a different villain every episode, and each villain seemed a little more stranger than the last one.
For the mummy.
Patrick Duffy played the man from Atlantis, a man who has no idea who he really is. He gets named Mark Harris and ends up working for a secret group called the Foundation for Oceanic Research.
We don't know what you'll run into.
The sea is my home.
Duffy was really the biggest asset the show had, both for his acting and for creating the scenes that convinced us a man could breathe underwater.
Your meltdown is over, Mr. Schubert.
During speaking underwater scenes, Duffy would inhale water to avoid leaving air bubbles. Duffy once said in an interview that he went from being able to stay underwater for 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes without air. The submarine Mark and the crew rode in was actually a miniature created by the special effects team of Gene Warren Sr., who had won an Academy Award for work on the 1960 movie The Time Machine. But while many scenes were impressive, not all special effects were top-notch as the series progressed. Like the giant jellyfish monster from the episode Man of War, which was plainly a really neat giant balloon. And I really don't know what the guy's screaming about. I mean, Mark Harris clearly has the ability to speak to giant balloons. Victor Buono, I don't know how to say that. The reoccurring villain, Mr. Schubert, gets attacked by one of the jellyfish's arms, but I'm not sure who has a hold of who here. And I do see a string on the end of the arm. Yes, probably wouldn't be visible on old TV sets, but it's interesting as it clues us in on how the arm was made to move. Now, Victor is one of those fun actors I always like to see pop up, as I know him best as the villain King Tut from the 1966 Batman TV show. That being said, I think they may have used him a little too much.
Nobody's listening to you from here on in, fat man.
I mean, it's good to have a wide variety of threats for a superhero and not the same bad guy too often. The weirdest episode of anything I've ever watched in my life, and yet still enjoyed up to a point, was Crystal Waters' sudden death. It was really bad, but who knows, maybe they meant for it to be bad. Mark discovers a force field of some kind under the ocean, and on the other side is dry land, which is interesting, I have to say. So it kind of reminds you a little bit of Journey to the Center of the Earth, at least in that respect. Well, Mark runs into these alien-looking mime guys who all have the same fashion sense. I mean, they wear white all day, every day. And to be honest, they sound a little like clucking chickens. And they walk like them too. Of course, strangely enough, they remind me a little of John Travolta back in the day. I really like that song, Staying Alive. And I don't know, something about this scene reminds me of the Three Stooges. Another thing I thought they did was actually kind of interesting was to adapt either Mork's Nanu hand gesture or was it Spock's? The two were about the same, I guess. Some of these hand gestures are just not exactly alike. On a trivia note, this episode had that actor from Star Trek Deep Space Nine who played Constable Odo. Sorry, but I admit defeat. I couldn't possibly say his name.
Oh, come on, you're no fun.
The best episode to me was Shootout at Land's End, where Mark finds a spot in the ocean that leads to the Old West, where someone is already there that appears to be his twin brother, Billy. Now, Mark shares the man's pains when they get close enough. Now, the bad guy turns out to be Pernell Roberts, best known as Adam Cartwright from Bonanza. I did find at least one little goof on this episode. There goes Mark's hat, and his hat's back on. I don't guess he stopped the horse to grab his hat and then get back on again. And then he loses his hat again. I wonder if one of his superpowers is the ability to grab a hat while it's on the ground without touching it. They did another time travel episode where Mark ends up saving Romeo and Juliet, which is a fine episode, but I'm not as crazy about that time period as the Old West. It guest starred John Shea, who would go on to play Lex Luthor on the 90s Superman TV series Lois and Clark.
Said, won't
So when they asked Patrick Duffy to throw the statue onto the ground, smashing it into bits, they hadn't considered the possibility that he might accidentally hit the camera as well. Well, everything worked out alright. At least he didn't break the camera. The episode Scavenger Hunt is interesting for a couple of guest stars and this weird creature that looks like a forerunner to something that would later appear on the Power Rangers. Or somebody stole one of those early 1960s monster costumes for one of the Godzilla movies from Japan.
You are what Elizabeth would call a fraud.
This episode guest starred the mighty Ted Cassidy, who seemed to have his footprint on almost every superhero show of the 70s.
How do you know that name?
In the 60s, he shot the fame as Lurch the Butler from the Addams Family, but in the 70s, he was usually the intimidating giant. He even played Goliath once versus David. The Bionic Bigfoot, he even did the voice of the Hulk and the show's intro narration. In this episode from Man from Atlantis, he played a native who led his people to basically worship the weird two-headed sea creature. Ted Neely guest starred as a good-natured con artist named Jack Muldoon. Now this was actually the second episode that Neely played Muldoon. The first was the episode Giant that featured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Well, of course you remember him. Giant basketball player, took on Bruce Lee, did the Airplane movie. There's a lot of giants in here. It was kind of a weird episode where Mark goes through one of those portals that seems to be everywhere, you know, and he ends up in a place where Kareem's character is somehow siphoning off the world's oceans. The episode Imp has a couple of classic TV and movie stars. Pat Morita from Happy Days and The Karate Kid plays a magical childlike imp that turns the minds of adults like Duke, played by Dick Gautier, into children and causes a lot of trouble by doing so. Now, Dick Gautier, I hope I'm saying that right,
Missed it by that much.
played the robot Jaime on Get Smart. The doctor responsible for saving Mark's life on the pilot episode was Dr. Elizabeth Merrill, played by Belinda J. Montgomery. She went on to appear in memorable roles such as Sonny Crockett's ex-wife on Miami Vice and as the mother of Doogie Howser. She must not have been too happy with the way the series was headed because she apparently sued to get out of her contract and missed out on the last 2 episodes. Alan Fudge played the administrator for the Foundation for Oceanic Research. In the episode C.W. Hyde, he gets the spotlight as his character turns into a Mr. Hyde personality type. Of course, you probably already know what happened to Patrick Duffy after The Man from Atlantis went off the air. Actually, before the last episode even aired, he was already working on Dallas as Bobby Ewing. After that, he went on to star in a series Step by Step, which was a fun comedy family sitcom.
If you want me to put it back in, we can play it again. Oh, come on, you're no fun.
Patrick Duffy must still have a soft spot for his role as Mark Harris because in 2016 he released a book he wrote on the show that I believe is just a continuation of Mark's story. Marvel Comics had a series for Man from Atlantis for 7 issues, but just as the TV series was canceled, so too was the comic book series. You know, I looked it up, and except for a few episodes, most of the later episodes from Man from Atlantis ran up against Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, at a time when almost every kid in America wanted to watch the Fonz. And even though I was a big Happy Days fan, I'm pretty sure I was watching Man from Atlantis, because it seems like Happy Days may have already been in syndication at that time, and it was on every day anyway for a big chunk of my childhood, so there was no reason to miss a TV superhero.
You double dare me?
Double dare.
Okay, well, you watch this. Okay.
But likely that's probably why Man from Atlantis was canceled. They put it up against the most popular couple of shows on television at the time. Lucan, a man with powers given to him by his strange upbringing.
You tell anyone else about this?
No.
Lucan is a 1977 to 1978 superhero TV series with a lot of potential that just wasn't given a chance to really grow. Lucan, a man who was raised by wolves as a boy, exhibits powers beyond those of normal men.
Might be dangerous. He could turn into a wolf.
It's ridiculous.
Each episode, he manages to either catch some bad guys or help out strangers. He roams the country, much like David Banner did on the Incredible Hulk TV series. Lucan debuted, though, a few months earlier than the Hulk. Of course, the idea of a hero traveling the country while being constantly pursued was most famously done first by the TV series The Fugitive. As a child, Lucan was given into a research institute to raise, an institute that initially does not want to give Lucan up to allow him to look for his parents on his own, even though he's 20 years old.
He's strong and he could be dangerous.
They send a bounty hunter after him, claiming Lucan may be dangerous.
That's a fact. Yeah, that's a fact.
So the question becomes, how does a 20-year-old man basically become the property of a scientific institution legally? They must have gotten a lot of criticism for this because later in the episode Nightmare, they completely retconned the series, where the viewer is now supposed to believe that Prentice the bounty hunter was always a police detective and Lucan was always wanted for a murder, which is probably the setup they should have started with. Another item shared by Lucan and David Banner was those glowing eyes. David Banner's eyes would glow green when transforming into the Hulk. Lucan's eyes would wolf out when he was exposed to danger. Lucan possesses great athletic and acrobatic skill. It was a little like Spider-Man of the Woods. Which reminds me, TV Spider-Man had glowing eyes as well to represent his spidey sense. He could run much faster than the average man and had a way with animals, even appearing to communicate telepathically, sort of like Aquaman, a power shared by the man from Atlantis. Well, at least when it came to horses. The biggest letdown from Lucan I saw as a 70s kid was the lack of cool sound effects to go along with Lucan's powers. Well, there was sort of a weird buzzing noise they used for his glowing eyes sometimes. But nothing that really stood out like the $6 Million Man's bionic sounds. Of course, the $6 Million Man didn't start off with those great sound effects. That came later on in the series.
It's wild, Steve. It's wild.
So I wonder if Lucan would have ended up with some cool sound effects later on. Now the Hulk had that great music and that transformation sound that went side by side with the green glowing eyes. Something like that, letting us know things were about to get real, would have been nice for the Lucan series. As a result, a lot of the action, it just seemed kind of flat. By the way, interestingly enough, the $7 Million Man himself, Monty Markham, and Diana Muldaur, who played David Banner's sister, appeared on a Lucan episode, How Do You Run Forever?, as people claiming to be Lucan's lost parents.
Was fantastic. I can't even tell you the feeling.
Having watched the episodes recently, thanks to the DVD release, I thought the individual stories were very good in Lucan, and you could say equivalent to shows like The Incredible Hulk. The lack of continuity in the overall premise had to hurt the show though, and the biggest issue was failing to really commit to Lucan as a full-fledged superhero. I mean, they wanted to ground it in reality while still holding on to the sci-fi elements, but I think they should have kept the stories grounded and went all the way with his powers, turned up the fun dial, with the sound effects and a bit more action and maybe a bit more of an explanation of said powers might have been in order as well. Counting the TV movie pilot, there were only 12 episodes in all.
Billy, be careful about letting your emotions cloud your reason.
Just like the 70s superhero TV series Shazam, where the young Billy Batson was mentored by the character named, Mentor, Lucan's older and wiser father-like figure was played by John Randolph as Dr. Don Hoagland. He appeared in 7 episodes. His character was responsible for raising Lucan once he was rescued from the woods as a boy, and he continued to help Lucan stay out of the clutches of the bounty hunter turned cop, Prentice. You might recognize the actor as Clark Griswold Sr. from the Christmas Vacation movie. On the episode Pariah, Lucan saves Robbie Wrist from a big fall. You know him as Cousin Oliver on the Brady Bunch, which coincidentally Robert Reed plays his father on this episode, which kind of blew my mind. Now here's a tiny goof for you. When Lucan goes to save Cousin Oliver, he goes prepared. If you look closely, you can see a line attached to Lucan. For a show with such a short run, it really had some pretty big guest stars. In the episode The Search, Leslie Nielsen played a crooked sheriff, and this was a few years before his career really took off with comedies such as Airplane and the Naked Gun movies.
What's my next line?
The very first episode featured Ned Beatty from Superman the Movie and Stockard Channing from Grease. The episode Listen to the Heartbeat had Stephanie Zimbalist from Remington Steele and Brian Dennehy from Rambo First Blood.
Well, what are you investigating? How about if we investigate you?
On the last episode of Lucan, there was Regis Philbin, Paul Brinegar from Rawhide, and Shug Fisher from the Beverly Hillbillies. Lucan actor Kevin Brophy continued to act after Lucan while holding down a job as a valet between 1983 and 2009. He appeared on an episode of Love Boat, 3 episodes of Trapper John M.D., an episode of Aftermash, a few other famous shows and low-budget movies. In 2012, an interesting twist occurred when a fan of his work died and left half of his estate to Brophy. Sadly, Brophy died in 2024 from cancer. He was only 70 years old and had been fighting cancer. Amazing Spider-Man TV series, based on the comic books obviously, ran from 77 to 79. But only 13 episodes were made, including a pilot. The show was a rating success from what I've read, but CBS was worried that too many kids were watching and not enough adults. So they didn't give it very many episodes, and they canceled it after a couple of years with only 13 episodes. And then there was this problem with having too many superheroes. Apparently they were worried about that as well, because they had, before they had Shazam, they had Wonder Woman, they had the Hulk, and so they were worried about being known as the superhero network. Of course, the series relied on practical effects, which for the most part looked great, especially when Spider-Man was climbing up walls.
What are you doing?
Did you know there was another hidden Hulk on the television series besides Lou Ferrigno? He was a bodybuilder and a friend of Lou's, who was the only one big enough to do stunts for Ferrigno. I say hidden, but he was rampaging there right before our very eyes, and we never knew it. According to the book, You Wouldn't Like Me When I'm Angry, Manny Perry was Lou's stunt double for the series. Here we see Perry and Lou holding up the stuntman and Hulk director Frank Orsatti. Now there's one thing that Lou did not like to do, and that's fool with heights, which I don't blame him. Now, according to what I read in the second TV movie that preceded the regular series known as The Return of the Incredible Hulk, or as Death in the Family, Lou was asked to jump off a house into a net with a stunt woman in his arms. He did so mostly thanks to Bill Bixby's encouragement. Apparently they must have gotten Manny Perry shortly thereafter. Now here's how one jump was done in the episode 747, a few episodes later. Now keep in mind they are supposed to have just have landed a plane, but if you look toward your left you can see the insides of a studio when the Incredible Lou opens up the door. Okay, so we see Lou jump out of a studio plane, and then they switch to Manny Perry. Was Perry actually on gamma rays, or what?
He's not a man. He's something else. Watch.
Then it's Perry we see running away and knocking over the fence, not Ferrigno. And most likely it was Perry doing this leap from the episode The Quiet Room. And if it was, I wonder if he had a net. One of my favorite mysteries has been trying to figure out who the Disco Hulk was. And now, based on my research, it has to be Manny Perry, since he was the official stunt double for Lou. I guess he wasn't used to working with wires, so he just sort of did a disco dance on the way down. In the episode Jake, Perry says he was thrown 8 feet in the air by the bull in this scene and landed 25 feet away. And the bull was even sedated.
And who you trying to kid? It's certainly a lot of bull.
So important safety tip. Never mess with a bull. Now if you look closely, you can tell that Lou is wrestling with a fake bull. You can see a crack where one of the horns connects, and his bull is a different color from the real one that Perry did eventually wrestle down for this scene.
He just wrestled a 1,600-pound bull.
Yeah, that sure is a lot of bull, all right.
If that wasn't dangerous enough, Perry had to wrestle a tank in the episode Blind Rage. The concern there was, what if the driver hit the gas instead of the brakes and ran right over him? Looks like the Hulk is wearing shoes for this one. Here's one from Perry from the episode Brainchild doing the superhero leap thing, you know, from rooftop to rooftop. In order to make it look like the Hulk was actually throwing bad guys through the air, they used a nitrogen-charged platform. The stuntman would hit a button, and away they would go, often over 20 feet. Now here's an example of one nitrogen-charged platform in operation with stuntman Dennis Danger Madelon. According to the book, You Wouldn't Like Me When I'm Angry, he actually was quite often one of the bad guys the Hulk threw on the series. But he's actually more widely known as the stuntman for the Greatest American Hero. So I guess you could say the Hulk actually fought the Greatest American Hero and won. A lot. Now here's another example of likely that same type of platform used on the Greatest American Hero for a takeoff. I'm not 100% sure that's Dennis Danger, but it probably is. Now this is kind of like the updated version of what they did with George Reeves back in the day, only it was just basically a diving board. On the Hulk episode, My Favorite Magician, you can actually see the board pop up as he throws this bad guy. Remember in the first season when the Hulk got trapped in a car crusher? I noticed a couple of little interesting goofs here. Looks like Lou wore off his green paint holding up the crusher. Then later the Hulk is the only thing stopping the crusher from crushing this guy. But just for a second, Lou's hand comes down far enough to where you can see he's not holding anything back in this shot. The paint coming off was a big problem in the bear scene from Death in the Family, as I've talked about in other videos, but I found out some other cool facts about this scene. The bear was actually named Pooh, and he apparently kept licking the paint off of Ferrigno during the shoot. In the part where Lou comes up out of the water in one take, he actually lost his wig, which got a lot of laughs from the crew. You know, that might actually explain why they felt the need to switch to an inside studio shot of Lou jumping out of the water here. Another little interesting bit of trivia, believe it or not, Kenneth Johnson had sent the script to Stan Lee, but ended up in an argument over whether or not the bear should have been a robot, to which Johnson was, of course, adamantly opposed. Now I'm glad that Johnson won that one, but I'm also glad that Stan Lee won the fight over keeping the Hulk green. You see, Johnson had wanted them to be red for the color of rage. Of course, one day there would be a red Hulk in the comics. Yep, I just happened to have the very first appearance of the Red Hulk. In order to get the stuffed bear to fly across the sky, they actually used a catapult. The paint coming off was such a problem that Laurie Prange had to change clothes constantly, running out of outfits even with 24 changes available. Did you ever notice in that same episode that when the Hulk throws the stump at the helicopter, breaking off the tail rotor, that in the next shot the rotor looks like it's still there? Danny Miller complained in the episode, The Harder They Fall, Lou got green paint all over him. He had to change his shirt after every take. Miller also noted that Lou picked him up and ran with him like he was a doll, which made him feel weak, which went against his outlook on himself as a 240-pound man who once starred as Tarzan in the 1959 movie Tarzan the Ape Man. From Lou's point of view, he said he did start to feel it after a couple of takes. Lou Ferrigno wasn't the only one who had to spend a lot of time in a makeup chair. For a complete transformation scene, Bixby would first get the green-tinted contacts, then in the second step, lasting about an hour and a half, they would add a forehead piece and a change of skin color. The last step would be for Lou to step in. All that for what amounts to a few seconds of a transformation scene. For the expanding muscle scenes, they would simply have Lou or Perry flex their muscles wearing a tight shirt with weak seams.
I really have to buy shirts that stretch.
Now let's run through some cool trivia facts from the Incredible Hulk TV series. The episode Never Give a Trucker an Even Break took many action scenes from Steven Spielberg's TV movie Duel, starring Dennis Weaver. Spielberg wasn't very happy, but to be honest, it was one of my favorite episodes to this day.
I know 25 cents!
The episode Final Round guest starred Cobra Kai's Martin Kove as a boxer named Rocky, which resulted in a lawsuit due to its similarities to Stallone's movie series. But I'm not sure why, really. I mean, after all, Rocky is a pretty common name for boxers. Rocky Marciano, for example. It was settled out of court. In the comics, Banner's full name is Robert Bruce Banner. On the show, it was David Bruce Banner. Stan Lee said the inspiration for the Hulk came from a combination of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein's monster. In the third season episode, Broken Image, there's an interesting scene right before McGee opens the door that bridges the gap between the $6 Million Man and the Incredible Hulk.
Is it true what they said about the $6 Million Man?
Well, if we printed it, it's true.
Now, Jack Colvin appeared on 4 episodes of The $6 Million Man, and of course the man who brought the Hulk to television, Kenneth Johnson, also worked on The $6 Million Man. The Incredible Hulk follows the same format as the very successful series The Fugitive, only it's a reporter named Jack McGee that hounds the Hulk, not the law.
All right, Dr. Banner. But I don't give up easily.
Do you ever show your face around here again? My friends are going to break both your legs.
Check out this neat Incredible Hulk foreshadowing from the episode Pay the Man the $24 from Bill Bixby's earlier TV series My Favorite Martian. It happens when Tim and Uncle Martin have traveled back into time during the Pilgrim days, and Tim ends up getting into a fight with an Indian over a girl.
Now look, I'm getting angry. I don't want to have to unleash my strength.
Sound familiar?
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Bill Bixby and Batgirl Yvonne Craig dated from 1965 to 1967. She also appeared on the third season episode Keep Me from the Church on Time, where Tim thinks he's getting married to her character. Just think, the Hulk marrying Batgirl. Bixby also dated Catwoman from the 1966 Batman movie, Lee Merriweather. They actually met years before during church choir. One of everybody's favorite episodes, including mine, was the 2-part second season episode Married, where David Banner gets remarried in Hawaii. But would it disappoint you to know that they faked it? It was actually filmed in California. In the episode Prometheus, they needed another actor to be in between Banner and the Hulk for the wider shots of the Demi-Hulk, where Banner was stuck in mid-transformation. So they called upon Rick Drayson. He also did a parody of the Hulk on a Wild Wild West TV movie. Another favorite is the 2-part episode The First, where Hulk actually fights another Hulk. This Hulk was played by Dick Durock, who also played the original Swamp Thing. Did you know that Richard Kill, best known as Jaws, the James Bond villain, was almost the Hulk? He was let go as it was determined he just wasn't bulky enough. He did manage to get into the DC universe once, fighting Superboy. Did you know Ted Cassidy from the Addams Family was the original voice of the Hulk before he passed away? He also did the opening narration of the show. After Ted Cassidy passed away, another voice was sought after for the Hulk in the form of Charles Napier. Strange they never thought to ask Lou Ferrigno, the literal embodiment of the Hulk, considering he went on to do the voice of the Hulk in the 90s animated series and several movies.
Rosie, get down.
Who are you?
Buck Rogers in the 25th Century was developed for television by Glenn A. Larson and Leslie Stevens. The show used a lot of props that were either used for Battlestar Galactica or were originally developed for that show. The first TV movie was released theatrically and made $21 million, which was a lot of money back then. And this prompted a series to be developed using the first movie as a pilot with some changes and edits. The pilot was, as in most shows, one of the best of the series, and I love the post-apocalyptic city. I just wish there was more of it later on in the series. Having just rewatched the series, I was left wanting more of the history from the perspective of the 25th century.
Sounds like the Beatles.
The Who?
No, not the Who, the Beatles.
The futuristic New Chicago that was no doubt created by the use of paintings and miniatures was pretty awesome to look at. Even though the effects and props were great, there were a few mysterious goofs. You wonder if someone's actually flying a starfighter at times. A close-up reveals the person flying from the side, but the model shot looks like either no one is flying or the person just happens to be seated too far back to be seen.
Are you all right, mister? There's a starfighter on our tail.
Sometimes it could be difficult to figure out who was sitting where. Like on this episode, we hear Wilma talking to Buck, but we don't see her. Then the next shot makes it appear as if Buck is alone. From the next side view, Wilma is nowhere to be seen. Then once the ship comes into the atmosphere, we see that nobody is in the starfighter. And finally we see Wilma sitting right next to Buck where she was not at before.
That's impossible.
Of course, there's a possibility that Wilma was hiding in the back and then she changed seats with Buck while they were being chased and fired upon by another starfighter.
I don't understand.
Mixing stock footage could sometimes cause confusion, like in the second episode when Wilma Deering, played by Erin Gray, is captured and placed on a shuttle. It changes in mid-flight, possibly, I believe, to a shuttle seen on Battlestar Galactica. With bigger television sets and clearer images, the times that actor Gil Gerard used a stunt double has become pretty obvious at times, like from this scene from the same episode, Planet of the Slave Girls. There's a really cool scene in this episode featuring the 1939 movie serial Buck Rogers actor Buster Crabbe. Here he plays Brigadier Gordon. Gordon tells Rogers, "I've been doing this since before you were born."
You think so?
Young man, I know so.
The name Brigadier Gordon is a reference to Crabbe's other famous role as Flash Gordon in several movie serials. He also played Tarzan in 1933. Now, Twiki is Buck's robot, and is voiced by Looney Tunes legend Bugs Bunny himself, Mel Blanc.
Buck taught me all I know.
Twiki loves using old 20th century sayings that he learned from Buck Rogers.
It's in the bag. What a bummer. Eat lead, sucker.
Coincidentally, Mel was also the voice of Daffy Duck as Duck Dodgers, whom he first voiced in 1953, of whom was a parody of Buck Rogers, of course.
Rosie, get down.
Nothing was quite as unsettling as when Mel Blanc was temporarily replaced by another voice actor in the second season due to illness.
Yep, that's right. I don't understand why you keep getting angry with one another.
Seems like they could have gotten somebody that kind of sounded the same at least.
Tisk tisk.
One word out of you, I turn you into a can opener.
Mel did come back after a few episodes, but by this time Twiki's role in the series had been greatly diminished. So of course Mel couldn't fit into the suit, so they had to get actor Felix Sela to be the physical representation of Twiki. He was also famous for the role of Cousin It from the Addams Family. Twiki had to carry around another robotic intelligence named Dr. Theopolis. He was a member of a council that programmed everything in the city. Why a body for Theopolis couldn't be created, I never really understood.
Everything's copacetic.
Copa what?
In the episode Vegas in Space, Twiki pulls off what looks like an unintentional magic trick. Items are taken off of Twiki's tray until there's nothing left, but by the end the camera points at Buck, and then watch what happens when it comes back to Twiki in his magic tray.
But somebody's got to do it.
What a guy.
From this to this, right before your eyes.
It really isn't as difficult as you think it is, Mama.
Did Buck just call Wilma Marla, another female character in this episode? Kind of hard to tell. You be the judge on this one.
It really isn't as difficult as you think it is, Mama. It really isn't as difficult as you think it is, Mama.
Complete technical schematics for the hatchet fighters.
Interesting technology for storing schematics in the 25th century. It looks like a cassette from an old lantern machine. As it says in the good book, there's nothing new under the sun. If disco is still around, then maybe cassette tapes will make a comeback as well. Of course, I can't really tell if they're dancing or trying to knit a very large sweater. Vegas in Space guest stars, as we've seen, Cesar Romero, who played the Joker in Batman. But there were more stars from Batman that would appear in the first season, such as Roddy McDowall, who played the Bookworm, Frank Gorshin, the Riddler, and Julie Newmar, who of course was Catwoman. It's interesting that when Buck makes a remark about his run-in with Gorshin's character in a later episode, he says this.
You wouldn't waste time with these riddles.
Here's another stuntman sighting. In the episode that guest stars Frank Gorshin, The Plot to Kill a City, there's one scene I think is worth mentioning that's kind of weird. Buck escapes the 25th century jail, and he throws the weirdest smoke bomb that I've ever seen. And that's almost all I know to say about it, other than I think it was really meant to be very psychedelic.
We'll discuss it later.
Marky Post from The Fall Guy and Night Court was also in that episode, wearing a cool-looking futuristic costume. This episode also puts Buck Rogers into the DC Comics universe. Listen to the announcement on the PA system.
Dr. Adam Strange from Alpha Centauri, Flight 8.
There they are.
Thanagar.
The message is for Adam Strange and mentions Alpha Centauri, the star system that the DC Comics hero travels to on a regular basis. The other message was about the planet Thanagar, home of the superhero Hawkman, which is kind of coincidental that Buck Rogers would introduce a Birdman named Hawk in the second season.
Dr. Adam Strange from Alpha Centauri, Flight 8.
There they are.
Thanagar.
On the episode Return of the Fighting 69th, this evil lady has a metal hand she'd gotten from a fire. But when she pulls it away, we see a short miracle happen for just a second, as her hand is completely restored. But then it's back to metal the next second. It went from this to this. Probably a reshoot, I guess. On the episode Unchained Woman, Buck has to break out guest star Jamie Lee Curtis from a prison while being chased by a robot with bionic vision and super strength. They must not make rocks out of the same material on this planet. It appears to have the weight of cardboard. Did you notice how it seems like it almost floats in the air for a second? The way they simulated super strength here was by simply not attaching the fence to the wall, which of course makes it a lot easier to knock down. On the episode Planet of Amazon Women, with no Linda Carter in sight, these two women capture Buck in an effort to replace the men that have been lost on the planet. Another Buck Rogers stuntman sighting, and then Buck gets zapped. The weird thing is, it looks like he got himself into the zap position before he actually got zapped. I wonder, did Buck want to get captured? On the episode Cosmic Whiz Kid, Different Strokes Gary Coleman and My Favorite Martian's Ray Walston guest star. Coleman is a child genius from the 20th century that had himself frozen and was awakened in the 25th century and made president of a colony. Ray Walston is the bad guy. He could easily be playing Uncle Martin from My Favorite Martian, only maybe he's gotten evil over time. And Martians do have a very long lifespan, if you'll recall. There's another stuntman sighting in this episode that's pretty noticeable, maybe even in old TV sets. You know, I know the prevailing wisdom is that most of these things weren't noticeable on old TVs, but I'm almost sure my dad used to point out stuff like this all the time when I was a kid. Later, when Buck and Coleman's guard come across a lawn protected by a photon shield, they deactivate it. But it seems like it would have been safer to just walk around instead. It looks like they had a nice sidewalk they could have used.
Once in a while, I kind of miss the way things were, don't you?
At the end of the episode, Gary Coleman's character makes a prediction that has sadly come to pass. Coleman's character lists all the things he missed from the 20th century, and the last one is...
Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes, and we now know that Saturday morning cartoons are a thing of the past, at least on the major networks. Now technically you can watch cartoons anytime you like, thanks to streaming services, cable channels, and DVDs. But it is interesting that Coleman would predict no more Saturday morning cartoons in the future, because he would have his own cartoon series that lasted one season in 1982, where he was an angel trying to earn his wings.
I miss cheeseburgers and comic books.
Yeah, honestly, it's not looking too good for comic books these days either. At least not the new ones.
Once in a while, I kind of miss the way things were, don't you?
Princess Ardala returns in the episode Escape from Wedded Bliss. Pamela Hensley played Ardala, who wanted Buck Rogers as her husband, or was it slave? I was never quite sure. She was evil, of course, and yet you almost felt sorry for her at times. If it weren't for Wilma, I could see Ardala turning good and getting hooked up with Buck. But spoiler, we don't even see Wilma and Buck get together. As the series progresses, there's just a little hint here and there that they might be a thing. As far as Princess Ardala goes, she made no appearances in the second season at all. The last episode of the first season with guest star Julie Newmar was the last we ever saw of her. In the episode Wedded Bliss, Buck has to knock the princess out in order to escape. But even though she's totally zonked out, I noticed that she still manages to hang on to Buck's neck. In the big fight scene with Tiger Man, Buck loses his belt in the fight, but only for a split second. And you will be happy to know that disco skating will make a comeback in the 25th century. In the episode Space Vampire, Wilma is zapped by a vampire with a big brain.
You
You may come to me now.
I think this vampire has been around a long time because it appears as if he's got a 20th century wristwatch on. Also, his power kind of sounds like a video game, but I can't put my finger on which one it is. Well, the good news is, even if they don't have cartoons and comic books, it looks like they have arcade games in the future. And happy birthday, Buck. I've got to ask this question. Does Buck really need to cut his way out of this one? Seems like he could just pull his hands out easy if he wanted to. Princess Ardala returned with Buck Rogers' robots.
At ease, Captains Rogers.
They used a very convincing split screen effect here. That's pretty neat considering how close they had to get Buck Rogers next to himself like this. They basically had to do 3 shots of him and lay the film down upon one another in layers. They used stand-ins for the back shot, most likely because Princess Ardala was in the way, and a split screen might have cut her in half. Although they might have gotten away with splitting the screen off at the last stand-in by moving Rogers over farther. Here's a split screen from I Dream of Jeannie that shows the kind of issues they ran into back in the day. Notice the woman's hand goes out of her side of the split screen and partially disappears. Of course, stand-ins work great, except the last guy seemed skinnier and had shorter hair than Rogers. Also in this episode was Michael Ansara, who played Kane, Ardala's right-hand man, in 3 episodes. He was in the classic Outer Limits episode Soldier with Tim O'Connor, who was Dr. Huer on Buck Rogers. In the episode, Tweaky is missing. Buck and Tweaky are getting hammered in a sonic chamber. Buck opts to lift Tweaky up to disable it, but it left me wondering, would it not have been easier to either keep on going out of range or just pick up his ray gun and zap it, since it was probably a lot lighter than Tweaky was. Also in this episode, Buck is knocked down with a psychic blast from Anne-Marie Martin, who would later partner up with Sledgehammer. The episode A Dream of Jennifer really stood out to me, as it gave us a chance to see Buck's past and see more of Buck's character. In it, he sees what looks like his long-lost love from the 20th century, a mystery that doesn't end well for Buck. It guest stars Battlestar Galactica's Anne Lockhart, daughter of Lost in Space's June Lockhart. The second season started a little late due to a writer's strike. It began in January of 1981. Viewers saw a lot of changes thrown at them all at once. The first thing was the intro now had replaced the voice of William Conrad as the narrator.
The year is 1987. NASA launched the last of America's deep space probes.
Conrad was famous for his detective show and, of course, as the narrator of Rocky and Bullwinkle. He had a legendary narrative voice.
And returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
They replaced him with Hank Sims, who was also very good, but I didn't really see a reason to make that change.
To return Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
Buck and Wilma are suddenly a part of the crew of the ship Searcher on a mission to find the lost tribes of Earth, mixing Star Trek with Battlestar Galactica. A new cranky robot was introduced named Crankton, and Buck got a Mr. Spock-like sidekick named Hawk, a half-bird man who at first hates humans. And as mentioned before, Tweaky's voice was temporarily changed due to Mel Blanc being ill. They replaced Tim O'Connor's character, Dr. Elias Huer, with Dr. Goodfellow, played by Wilfred Hyde White. It was disappointing to not have Tim O'Connor return. To me, he will always be the alien Andros from the first season of Wonder Woman. But he was a great actor, so it puzzles me as to why they would want to replace him. Another new character they added was the Admiral of the Searcher, played by Jay Garner. On the episode Journey to Oasis, Mark Leonard guest starred as Ambassador Duvall. He is best known as the actor who played Spock's dad on Star Trek. In this episode, he was from an alien race that could remove his head and put it back on, of course. Notice how the head goes from real to plastic looking. The same thing happened on the $6 Million Man when they removed the head from the fake Oscar. On the close-up, it's obvious, of course, that the actor just has his hands on his head, as if he were actually holding it up. But it's the first part with the pulled-up collar and the fake head that really sells it. I always prefer seeing outside shots to the in-studio shots, where sometimes you can see where the sky actually ends. And other times, the sky is wrinkled or creased. And the creases are definitely a symptom of better screens allowing us to see what we weren't supposed to notice, but I still think the outside shots are much better.
It's an earthquake, a big one, on the ground, everybody.
Here's a question for you. If you're on another planet that starts to quake, is it still an earthquake, or should it be whatever planet you are on quake? Also, I hear Wilma in this scene, but I don't see her lips moving.
It's an earthquake, a big one, on the ground, everybody.
Season 2's Testimony of a Traitor was a particularly fun episode. I really like seeing Buck deal with his past. I did have a question though. In the scene where they put a brain scanner on Buck to see his actual memories, shouldn't we be seeing the action from his eyes and not the camera's? Probably not as easy to follow that way, but it just hit me while I was watching it. I hope y'all enjoyed this trip back in time to the 1970s, a time of fun sci-fi and superheroes. Please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe if you haven't already for more classic TV goofs, facts, and fun memories. Y'all have a great day.